cross-examination?
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Good morning, Ms. Fischer.
Good morning.
I have a couple of questions for you because I'm rather confused a little bit about the timeline of when you were working at Young Minds. Am I correct in that today you said you would work there for approximately 5 years from 1999 on?
1999 to 2004. I completed the school year and left in 2000.
Okay. And you had identified in the picture the owner of Young Minds, Ms. Hamel, is that?
Mary Van Hamel?
Yeah. Is that correct? She was the
Yes.
owner? Okay.
Her and her husband own the school.
And did it have a different name prior to their taking over the school?
It was, they bought it from the Tudor Time franchise.
Okay. So, do you know whether there were other Tudor Time franchises in the area?
Tudor Time had been going out of business at that time, so there were a few schools for sale. They bought one of them, but I believe there was one not far on Wiles Road and maybe Riverside or something like that. There was one in Coral Springs not far. I think the one in Boca closed near the same time that they bought Young Minds.
All right. But did they only buy the one?
Yes.
Okay. And that's,
They sold it and bought a school in Gainesville, but here they only had one school.
and that was the former Tudor Time, where you were the director for
Yes.
from 99.
They had nothing to do with Tudor Time. We bought it from Tudor Time and had to remove anything Tudor Time affiliated to the school.
Okay. And let me ask you, does this name ring any bells to you? Lauren Stabile, Stabile.
Lauren what?
Lauren Stabile, Stabile.
Not that I can recall.
Okay. You don't have any recollection of her working at Young Minds?
No.
Would it surprise you if there's a document that indicates that this Lauren Stabile did a preschool teacher questionnaire, just like the one you did, on March 18th of 2002?
In all honesty, I'm confused by that because ours were so close in time, and Nikolas stayed on at Young Minds for a bit after I did mine.
And are you aware that it also says the school name is Tudor Time on that particular questionnaire that Ms. Stabile did? So you don't have any explanation as to why she would have done a questionnaire just basically 2 months after you did one and put a different school name on it?
No, and I don't think it was affiliated to Young Minds Learning Center.
And it's your testimony today that the defendant, Nikolas Cruz, was still at Young Minds on March 18th, 2002.
Yes.
And were you remember?
To what I best recollect, I don't remember Nikolas leaving before me.
Was he still there when you left?
From what I recall and remember, I believe so.
And by that time, his brother was also there?
Zachary had started.
Would you agree that sometimes it's not unusual for parents to admit that they've adopted children? As a matter of fact, sometimes it's hard for them to even tell their own children that they're adopted.
What was the question? I'm sorry?
Would you agree with me that a lot of times parents have trouble telling other folks that their children are adopted?
Yes.
So it wasn't surprising to you that Linda Cruz took a little while before she finally told you that day.
It would be the same thing if I adopted. I would just want everybody to think that they were my children and, had the normal family.
Okay. So again, it wasn't as much of a surprise to you that maybe it took her a little while to warm up to you, to get to know you, and then she was able to open up and tell you more.
Yes.
Okay. And that happened slowly over the period.
Not you.
Pardon?
I was not shushing you. Excuse me.
Oh, okay.
Shushing me. Sorry, Mr. Klinger.
That's all right. So she was over the period of, well, let me strike that for a moment. Let me ask you, do you remember when Nikolas Cruz, the defendant, first came, or how old he was when he first started at Young Minds?
I might be wrong. I thought it was just before 1. I thought he was in our baby room, but he was definitely, I can't recall for sure on that one, but I know he's definitely in our 1-year-old room.
Okay.
I thought he started just prior to the baby room, but I might be wrong.
All right, well, he was born in September of 1998. Do you recall that?
That he was born in September 1998?
In September?
No, I didn't recall it recently, but
Okay. Well, if he was born in September of 1998, he would have turned 1 in 99, and then let's say 1.5 in the early part of the year 2000. Correct?
from what I can quickly do my math on, I believe so. He would be in a 1-year-old room.
And by that time, you would have already been the director of Young Minds.
Yes.
And he wasn't there when you first started, obviously, or was he?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, because you started in 99, and he would have been approaching a year old in 1999, right? Okay. So I believe your testimony was once Linda Cruz had warmed up to you, she came forward with adoption information and shared more information about the defendant and his adopted mother, his birth mother, his biological birth mother, correct?
Yes.
So she, you would say by that point, she was definitely coming forth with all the information that you felt would be necessary to make an adequate assessment of the defendant.
Yeah.
And I believe it was your testimony that you felt that she very much loved her sons and would do anything to help them in her anything in her power to help them and take care of them.
I believe so.
The other area I'm a little confused about was when you had mentioned that, well, you had mentioned earlier that that Linda Cruz told you later on about the adoption, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And it was also later in time she told you about his biological birth mother, correct?
Yeah, about near the same time.
All right. And would that have been, if you can remember, in and around the time that you did your assessment, that questionnaire in 2002?
I believe so. I think it was just prior to it, but I can't guarantee if it was just prior or right after I filled it out.
Okay. And when you were talking about going to the house, the birthday party, was that also in that time frame, or was that in a later time frame?
I'm not positive, but it was for, I believe it was, and I'm totally not positive on this, I believe it was Nicholas's second birthday.
Okay. So again,
I
going on the
don't think
assumption-
it was third, but I'm pretty sure, if I was at a birthday party, I'm pretty sure it would have been second, not third, but I'm not positive.
All right, but going on the assumption that, as I told you earlier, that he was born in September of 1998, so his second birthday would have been, if that's correct, it would have been in 2000,
20.
correct? And he was already at the school at that point.
Yes.
Okay. Do you remember a Caitlin Westerland? Does that ring any bells?
Yes.
And how do you remember her?
Caitlin was a student at Young Minds as well, and I believe she was Nicholas's neighbor too. I believe that they lived like diagonally across the street. I used to babysit Caitlin as well. I didn't babysit Nicholas, but I babysit Caitlin.
You babysat Caitlin. All right. And then, so obviously you knew her mother, Patricia?
Yeah.
Okay. And do you know whether or not they were friends with the Cruzes?
Yes.
And did they ever, not Caitlin, but did her mother ever talk to you about the defendant, Nikolas Cruz?
About what?
About the defendant. Did her mother, Patricia, ever talk to you about the defendant, Nikolas
Just
Cruz?
as that they're friends, and she's friends with Linda and neighbors.
But nothing about any possible issues that the defendant, Nikolas Cruz, was having?
No, not that I recall.
Did you continue to babysit for the Westlands after you had left?
No.
That was all during that time period that you were at?
Yeah, it was just
Illinois?
maybe 3 times.
Okay. And one last thing I'd like to ask you. You had mentioned on direct examination that you felt the defendant, Nikolas Cruz's head and his ears were basically too large, or it seemed too large for his body. Is that correct?
In my opinion, his ears seem larger than what his face size was.
All right, this I'm going to show you once again. It was defense 11. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. And you've had experience with children, well, probably a lot more than I have. To me, it just seems that the defendant's ears they're sticking out, but they don't seem to be much different in size than Zach's ears.
No.
Would you agree?
Yes.
Okay. And how about the head size? Not much difference between the two. Would you agree?
Between the head size and the body?
Yeah, and for both.
I think if he was standing up, the head size to me was smaller than the body size.
All right, but in that particular
No,
photo,
in that particular,
I'm sorry,
no.
can we just do one at a time?
in that particular photo, if you're just looking at the two
Yes,
heads,
it looks all normal.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Okay, does the defense have anything else for this witness? Sure.
Just a few questions, Ms. Fisher, and we'll be done. Showing you again Defense Exhibit 11. Looking at this photograph, you're aware that there's a 14-month age difference between those two boys,
I
right?
remember they were a year apart. I didn't know how far a year apart.
Okay. And they look about the same size? In your opinion, or no? I don't want to put words in your mouth.
I would say so, because Zachary's sitting at a little lower height than Nicholas.
And I know that in this picture, the observations that you made don't accurately reflect what you saw, but your personal observations over a period of time when you were at Young Minds were that his body was not in proportion.
Yes.
His head was larger than his body.
Yes.
Ears were larger than his head.
That's something I remember well.
Mr. Klinger asked you about another preschool questionnaire that was done by Lauren Stabile. I'd like to approach the witness. I'm referring to SDEC 05 and 06. Her parent question. And do we have hers back? Not yet. Okay. I'm now going to show you what has been marked as 4X for identification. Do you recognize the document? Not the contents of the document, but the document itself?
Yes.
Okay. What is that document?
It's a Findler assessment for a teacher to complete.
And is that similar to the document that you filled out?
Yes.
And what's the date on the document that you have in front of you that was filled out?
March 25th, 2002.
And the name of the school was?
Tutor time.
That was not where you were teaching,
No.
correct? And if we look back to, I'm going to have to ask the court because they have the original, what her document is referred to is Exhibit 12. Thank you. I'm showing you my copy. That's the one that you filled out in reference to Nikolas Cruz. Is that
Yes.
correct? And what date did you fill that out?
January 22nd, 2002.
And what school were you at when you filled that out?
Young Minds Learning Center.
So this is 2 different schools,
Yeah.
2 different teachers.
Yeah.
And let me ask you this, as you review this document, the teacher makes some notes, and based on the representations that the teacher made, how long had Nikolas been at that school?
Objection outside the scope.
Oh.
Answer.
Yes, you can.
5 weeks.
You never saw this document?
No.
Were you ever, Your Honor, I'd like to move into evidence that's previously been marked as 4X for, in evidence.
Is there any objection?
No, Your Honor.
4X, defense 4X for identification will be received without objection as defense 13.
May I publish to the jury, Your Honor,
You may.
after the clerk marks it? Sorry, no, okay. Were you ever advised that Nicholas was asked to leave Young Mind Learning Center?
Was I what?
Ever advised that Nicholas was asked to leave Young Mind Learning Center?
Not shortly after I left, no.
Okay.
I was told I'm on the way somewhere.
I'm sorry?
I don't know if I was told along the way through all this, if I was told he left or not.
Okay. Now, you took a deposition in this case, correct?
Yes.
And I think Mr. Klinger was actually referring to some of the conversations that we had during that deposition, right?
Yes.
Your timeline's a little off, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay. Did you tell them that your timeline may not be accurate in the deposition?
Yes.
Did you have access to your resume?
No.
Did you tell them that you didn't have access to
Yes,
your
I went and asked if I can find it to make sure to have the dates. I've been to several schools between now and then, and we're talking about over 20 years ago, but I couldn't find a resume.
Okay. So if your dates are off, it's by months. Is that correct?
I believe so.
Okay. But the behaviors that you observed, those are what you truly observed, correct?
Yeah. I mean, that's the bottom line. Is like for when he's in the 1-year-old room and he's in the 2-year-old room, I was there, and that was my concern, and that was my time frame for him to get help.
And because of all of those concerns, you met with Linda and you did the Fiddler evaluation, correct?
Yes.
And is it, and I agree with Mr. Klinger, and I think you do too, that naturally parents are reluctant to tell people they don't know that their child is adopted, correct?
Yes.
But they're more open to conversations about possible developmental delays and maybe your kid needs some services. Would you agree with that?
On the most part. Yep.
I have no further questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. You're excused.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a 15-minute break. Please do not discuss the case among yourselves. Please leave your notepads behind in your seats. Thank you.